great thing about Bitcoin is that you can start with arbitrary small amounts and you don't need any forms to fill out, no permission asked. Anyone, any place in the world can do that in one way or another. In the long run, it's much better not to have too much hope and faith in politicians because they don't solve your problems. They will never be able to solve your problems.
Hi, Rahim. Welcome to the BitcoinBázis Podcast.
Hello.
Let's start with our usual question with a little bit of twist. So, as an Austrian economist, what was the precise moment when you realized that Bitcoin was not just tech, but like monetary theory in action?
Oh, it was very gradual. I learned about Bitcoin very early. And what made me skeptical about it was that exactly it was presented as a monetary solution already in the beginning. And that's very unusual because money is discovered on markets. So I was lucky in hearing very early about it, but unlucky that monetary theory tells you that money is rather discovery or discovered on markets than imposed or organized or planned. But I knew that money is a protocol, so more akin to software or language. And that certainly helped grasping Bitcoin over time.
And do you remember your actual orange pill moment when you first heard about Bitcoin or when you started to believe in it?
Yes. The first time I saw a non-zero value for Bitcoin was when I discovered the first use case, and that was Silk Road, the dark net market. I was not a user, but I was very interested in markets, of course, and spontaneously emerging markets. And was the first time that I could understand as an economist, yes, there is some non-zero value because it helps people to achieve their ends in a better way. They get better quality at lower prices. And that's what money is for, to expand the range of market opportunities you have.
And do you think that like Bitcoin confirms what you already believed about money and state in general, or did it challenge your beliefs in like economics in general?
Yes, it was very challenging because we know that value is subjective, so it's always a discovery. And for us living in rather privileged Western setups, most didn't see the urgent need to replace money because we're all used to using money every day. So the hardest thing was discovering these use cases and understand them through the eyes of the people using Bitcoin. And still, if you live in the West and you think that you are doing good investment decisions for a large part of the people that have the money and are having more and more money due to the distortions of the market, it doesn't seem like Bitcoin solves anything for them. Rather than being another speculative asset. So that's the biggest challenge. So the Austrian school was guiding me through that a bit, but also making it very difficult because I was skeptical about any ledger-based money. And Bitcoin, of course, on the outside, it looks like a ledger. It's a ledger, but it also is a network. And it's a tool, it's a technology. So you really have to understand the ends that human beings have and for which it can be a means. And early on, that was the most difficult thing, that understanding that out of curiosity, people would start collecting scarce numbers. Seems like a very odd thing to understand. So that took a while.
But you said that you were interested in like emerging markets, so you probably like looked into like other use cases as well, and probably like other emerging markets as well. So it was possibly easier for you to see the use case, not just as like a normal Western person.
Yes, it was easier, but only through the practical experience, I'd say. Of course, when reading the books of the Austrian school, they don't tell you about what's happening right now. So I needed to have an interest in the early internet, I needed to share the values of the early cypherpunks, to help me discover Bitcoin. And then it was travels through China that gave me the second orange pill moment, when I understood it helped Chinese entrepreneurs circumvent capital controls. And I saw, okay, it has even higher value than I thought. Still, of course, far away from today's prices, even after that correction. But this experience helped me being confident that it wouldn't have zero value.
A Binance a világ egyik legnagyobb és legismertebb kriptotőzsdéje. Több mint 300 millió regisztrált felhasználóval világszerte. Itt valóban mindent egy helyen intézhetsz. Aktívan kereskedhetsz, stékelhetsz a Binance Earn keretében passzív jutalomért, és részt vehetsz új projektek token kibocsátásában a Launchpaden. Ha már nagyon pró vagy, akár tőkeáttétellel is kereskedhetsz, sőt, automatizálhatod is a kereskedést. A podcast leírásában megtalálod a regisztrációs linkünket. Ha azon keresztül regisztrálsz, akkor 20% kedvezményt kapsz a kereskedési díjból. Neked nem kerül pluszba, de ezzel támogatsz minket, hogy még több hasznos kriptos tartalmat készíthessünk.
And do you think that Bitcoin primarily like a monetary revolution then, or like is it like a civilizational correction when it comes to money?
The thing is with revolutions in technology, it's very hard to understand them while they are happening. So it's usually not the inventions that reap all the value. So Bitcoin is an innovation. That's a combination of inventions that are revolutionary, but we're in different fields. So one is cryptography, the public-private key pair, which is just one element, not even the most important one of Bitcoin. Then this consensus mechanism, the mining structure that comes from the problem of handling spam originally to impose some non-fakeable cost on stuff. So it's a lot of inventions, and even the people who were early in those inventions were usually not part of the innovation process. Innovation means that something is rolled out in the market and people understand that it's a means to their ends. And of course, in a sense, it's a correction that people only have problems if there are problems. So these problems emerge in different places. For a while, the problem in China is the lack of capital mobility. Thus, it's very hard to save. It's very hard to say no to that kind of development in China happening and make your own decisions and have this kind of autonomy. And so that's a problem, of course. And in the West, the biggest problem is that people are accustomed to a high trust institutional setup. So they have learned to trust their institutions. They think that we are in the world's leading first world countries. And then it's only gradually, once the productivity goes down, economic difficulties appear, that people lose that hope in the future and see saving for the future as a challenge. And then they realize, okay, what we learned as kids, like just put the pennies in a piggy bank or put it in the bank account, really doesn't seem to solve anything. It feels like a hamster wheel, in particular if you add debt to the structure, rising housing costs, and so on. So these are problems, and those are civilizational problems, existential problems for many people. And so, of course, when people experiment with new technologies and means to cope with these problems, it's a kind of correction, and that gives hope in Bitcoin, and it makes a lot of Bitcoiners very optimistic and hopeful about the future, is that actually it seems like there's a way to autocorrect, to correct for yourself what do you think are problems and not have this common apathy or even just anger, unproductive anger at institutions. Is you can do something else. It's a kind of exit ticket to systems that you see that are not working as well anymore.
Do you think like in the West we got like too comfortable in the institutions, and in general like we are not educating ourselves enough about like financial, I mean like, yeah, there is not an evolved like financial education?
Yes, but education is part of this institutional trust structure, and this trust has also been abused. Education doesn't really work on the institutional scale-up version, or we don't understand anymore what it was meant to be for. So yes, we've become too comfortable. But it's an old story, and civilizational ups and downs. There were good reasons. A lot of the superior economic and cultural development on the West has a cultural basis, and these cultural habits then form institutions, and for a while these institutions work well because they encompass and structure these kind of cultural assets that are there. But then when something ossifies as a structure, it's always a way for individuals to live off the capital that has built gradually over time by a larger culture and live off too comfortably. And that's, of course, I think an obvious reactions of young people now, if they look at the so-called boomer generation, so those who got old after the war or after the Soviet Union dynamics of catch-up growth and then having an economically comfortable situation for many people. Unfortunately, people didn't really understand where the productivity comes from, and they felt it's just natural. It's just there. It's just wealth. It just has to be distributed correctly, and didn't see it as a responsibility. It's always easier to consume. And that's a big insight of the Austrian school, with human beings tend to be short-term oriented because that comes from our evolution. We needed to survive in short times and make use of anything that arises, any energy boost that arises. And these short-termisms within structures that have been built up over the very long term then leads to the gradual decline of those structures. And makes those structures more unjust over time, and gives very bad incentives. So we have a lot of, I'd say, a parasitical mindset in Europe developing. It's like this kind of comfort. You feel you have a right to it. It's natural. You just live off of it. But don't see what effort it takes to maintain such a structure. And money is part of the structure, and maybe the most underrated, most important protocol of societal cooperation. And we've allowed to degrade structurally for the benefit of a lot of vested interests, but also for perceived benefits of the middle of society. So a lot of people thought that they are the beneficiary of that structure. And gradually, more and more people learn that no, that's actually, in the long term, that's not the case.
Yeah, and then because we got like so entitled and so comfortable in this situation, like we stunted our own growth in the whole of Europe, because we are trying to regulate like every part of the economy so much that like it's really hard to build something very innovative in the space. And then this way, like all of the capital flows to like other markets where it's less regulation or less of these like borders that you need to go through as an entrepreneur, for example.
Yes, but that's a symptom of an aging and dying out society, unfortunately. And we've seen that pattern in the past. Most Europeans assume today that their children will have a worse time than themselves. And consciously or unconsciously, they believe that. And that, of course, doesn't make it easier to have kids in the first place. And the whole outlook is more about fear and holding on to what you've got than risking and building something new and building a future.
Can you tell me like how the Austrian economics could actually like solve this issue? Or what changes would we need to make in Europe that like could lead us to a better outcome?
The Austrian school is not a package of solutions. It developed in quite similar circumstances in the big societal and political and economic crisis of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So it was the brightest thinkers of the days trying to understand these problems, and then they became not, as usually intellectuals would then claim that they have the solution and just need to get the power. They realized that the problems run much deeper, and They run even into the metaphysical. A lot of thinkers around the Austrian school discovered this kind of replacement religions, so superstitions that modern people develop that are not more enlightened than what people thought before. They just look more scientific or modern, those ideas, but are still superstitions. So it was seen as a more a cultural and in the sphere of ideas, a kind of struggle, civilizational struggle that's happening. And when you realize that you don't have an easy solution, the best solution is usually a humble one, is try to understand first and then allow a diversity of ideas and approaches. And that was found rather in the old Europe. So it's not a reactionary stance. It was in the older Europe where the Austrian school saw more continuity, and that was the Northern Italian or Hanseatic League, decentralized Europe, of which very little has been retained. The last vestiges of this old Europe are in the tiny states, the micronations in Europe and in Switzerland, where still this older, more decentralized structure that has been centralized a lot. So decentralization, I think, was one of the major solutions, because it's not a solution. It's not one person, one organization, one idea saying, I know it all, I can fix it all. It's rather saying, okay, be wary and be afraid of people who come along and think they can reform the EU or fix the EU, like a kind of supranation level, fix things. It's much more likely they'll create more harm. And that, of course, led to the criticism of central planning. And then a big insight that central planning doesn't only happen at the stage of the enterprise, it can also happen on the monetary layer. So monetary central planning or money socialism is really one of the biggest ills. And that's how technologies like Bitcoin come in as something hopeful. It's as a kind of alternative structures and protocols that can work when the existing structures are not working anymore. And then it's really just having alternatives for discovery procedure. And in Europe, that means our biggest hope is mobility of people and capital. That sounds a bit unfortunate. It's very unlikely that we'll have like just vote for better politicians on the EU level and change things. It's much more likely, and we see that already happening. And we've seen positive change even. So some of the worst countries to be an entrepreneur in had to open up again, had to accommodate to wealthier people that had left their countries already. For example, Greece and Italy are still not good places on the planet to be an entrepreneur, but they, out of pain, tried everything they could to entice their wealthy entrepreneurs that had left their countries to come back to those places. And that's the kind of hope we have in Europe. We still have great human capital, a lot of very bright people that flock to places like Dubai and Singapore these days. It's this relative mobility of capital as well, that Europeans, in contrast to Chinese, still have it easier to invest in alternative technologies, alternative ventures, projects, to invest internationally, to see the hope in other locations. Not that they'll necessarily be better in every regard than European places. Europe still has a lot of quality of life to offer, but it's this kind of competition between jurisdictions. And hopefully in the long run, the competition for those people that are able to produce value with new technology that can lead to a change. And then really our only hope is that Europe has not been completely centralized and homogenized. That we still have smaller countries, that we have parts, regions and countries that have a very diverse heritage and could change things pretty quickly, but usually change happens through pain. That's like people realizing, okay, it's not really working out. We don't have any alternative path to change. So in the long term, I'm optimistic, but it's not that there's a book with solutions ready to be handed over to a politician or a CEO of Europe or some kind of thing.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, like the whole idea was kind of like to have a community in Europe that is still like preserving all the cultures and preserving like all the heritage that you have in your country, but still enabling like easier movement and better deals between countries. And yet it kind of went south in every sense possible. So as a Hungarian, it's even like, I don't know, it's very hard to comprehend what is going on politically in general, because like our internal politics is not great, that's for sure. Like this is a mess what is going on right now, and no one is happy about it. But in Europe in general, like what they see is that we got like Viktor Orban, who is making decisions, or like their party making decisions, which is not representing the people, but at the same time sometimes it does contain like the Hungarian spirit in general to actually like keep our independence, let's just say, but in very little percentage. Let's just
Hungary is very interesting in that regard, because there in a small scale you have all the issues that we have in any other place, and that's like the urban populations that are usually more cosmopolitan, more open, which used to be a good thing. But then the big cities like Budapest or Vienna, that used to be big because they were centers of finance, of technology, of commerce, turned into administrative centers and academic centers. So it's the productivity goes down. A lot of it is tourism, and if you have this whole class, this political class emerging around it, it sets us apart from the countryside. And the biggest thing that's overlooked is the cantillon effect. It's like where the fiat money is received first, and that's in the big cities. And it tends unconsciously in the countryside to perceive people earlier to be at odds with what they perceive the direction of a country is, because they feel like they are losing out on something. There's a lot of price to pay for development, but they are not getting the returns of that. And that explains why in almost every country, same in the US, same in Austria, everywhere the countryside votes differently to the big cities. And historically, the right approach was to understand that big cities are very different. Nowadays, of course, if you just compare the nation state with a EU super state, obviously the nation state tends to be smaller, and being smaller has advantages. It means more diversity. It's better to have like a Hungarian identity and an Austrian identity and a Romanian identity, a bit at odds sometimes, because it leads to a higher diversity on even in ideas and political structures. But of course, those identities are just abbreviations of very complex historical processes. So there's nothing such as an Austrian school, really, in the sense of Austrian, because Austria, as it was then, is a completely different thing. You know, we could call it an Austro-Hungarian school, but then like the Hungarians of the Austrian school were called Schwietland, for example. Like German names were born in Buda or Pest, a lot of important ones, even Julia Kautz or Julius Kautz was a big inspiration for Karl Menger. So there were a lot of people like with links to what's now Hungary as part of that tradition. But the centralized ethnic nation state hadn't formed yet. There were big identities competing, and usually competing within the breast of one person, because you had different family backgrounds. Some had Jewish heritage. Their families had moved alongside the whole Austro-Hungarian structure. Some discovered, even though they had a German last name, they discovered the Hungarian history and identity and really embraced it a lot. So it was very complex. And the historical approach in Europe was really to understand that settlement patterns are can be dynamic, and cities are very different from the countryside, and it's not good to have one size fits all. So you have different sets of rules, and then the Austrian school was very crucial in like setting the precedent for what's good about the EU. This kind of understanding that commerce needs a kind of openness, and that's a win-win thing. It's good to exchange with foreigners with different identities, because it's a peaceful way to find a win-win situation. But they also understood, a lot of Austrians, when there was war and totalitarian in Austria, moved to Switzerland first, and a few settled in Geneva, and they were very crucial in coming up with this modern post-war order of potentially having legal standards that allow international business and international commerce and free trade amongst nations that were enemies before. But then Hayek, for example, suggested and understood, and Mises as well, that probably it's not a good idea to what you do in commerce, which is really about linking foreigners, to do the same in culture. So even though you want to have this openness and see it as a kind of protocol and don't see really borders, in the cultural sphere, it's good sometimes to have borders in the sense of your people should be free to associate with other people, and they'll settle with people that are more like-minded, and this kind of homogeneity allows for autonomy. And that's how the cities in the past managed to be very autonomous. They had a group of merchants with a lot of capital that were crucial, but then they allowed for foreign merchants to settle in their own little settlements and have their own rules and their own autonomy within that structure. And that allowed for all this experimentation and liberty that really put Europe ahead. That's why the wealthiest parts of Europe were those where we had this city autonomy without being necessarily linked to a big centralized nation state. And the city autonomy doesn't need to be at odds with identities. So still students would group among the direction from which they were coming, and they called that nation. It was not a nation in the modern sense. It's more like, okay, where I'm coming from, do I have similar roots? Do I come from a similar direction? Do I come from the Mediterranean or from the Hungarian side? So that's a crucial insight. And there's also part of decentralization. It's not one size fits all. And that's, I think, the only way to cope, because otherwise we'll have just this idea of a homogeneous nation state versus the EU, or a world state, and that is just a binary thing, which puts at risk a lot of the positive things we had in Europe, this kind of commerce and openness to ideas and exchange of ideas that was very much embodied in this original Austrian school, where when you look at the birthplaces of the people, it's like today's Ukraine, today's Hungary, today's Poland, and it's a whole mix. But people that associated voluntarily with other like-minded people, that were like-minded because they took an interest in understanding reality first, and have a good and critical and open discussion about that.
Yeah, that's what we actually possibly need to preserve in the future, and not become like the next United States of America in general, because that's not what we are aiming for, especially like without the different languages, different ideas. Hopefully the EU is going to take a turn, and then we're going to like move towards that kind of European Union in the future. I think it started in the COVID area, to be honest. So like there was kind of like a big friction when it came to like all the understanding and all the agreements that there was at the time. But yeah, like we should see like how it plays out. I'm kind of hopeful. We have an election coming up in Hungary as well, so let's hope for the best. and then let's see like how it's gonna turn out. Let's get back to Bitcoin a little bit. Like, do you believe that Bitcoin's fixed supply is economically optimal, or is there any like better solutions, or any like argument for having a currency that has not a fixed supply?
I think it's a feature, and it's a feature not so much the fixed number of the supply. It's that we know that rules are not changed arbitrarily. We can never know about an optimum. It's all a discovery process. The big issue, if you think you can directly have like expertise answered it, like ask the economist for the optimal supply and implement it, is usually it'll be wrong. Usually it'll be wrong. So what Bitcoin fixed, in a sense, was a rule-based money. It has this algorithmic structure, and that's a big advantage because imagine if the supply was up to agreement or consensus among monetary economists, even just Bitcoiners. There is disagreement, and there are good reasons for disagreement. I think the best answer to it is to understand that money is not just one thing. It's really a protocol, and in the past it had many layers. So it's good to look at Bitcoin as a kind of settlement layer of money. It's a form, or it could be a payment structure that leads to final settlement. And that's how we use it also today. If I move on chain Bitcoin to someone else, it's final. You can redo it, and it's a settlement. It's like there's no debt obligation linked to it. It's not an IOU. It's a settlement. And then we have structures built on that, like Lightning with channel liquidity, where also we use Bitcoin on-chain as the kind of final settlement layer. And we can imagine other forms of money. So no one knows what's the optimal supply of assets that people perceive to have some moneyness, which is a very complex construct. So Austrian school economists realized that money is not a thing. That's why it's so difficult. It's an attribute. It's moneyness, actually. So things have different kinds of moneyness, and there's no objective way. It's a subjective discovery with a network effect. So the more people find a kind of agreement through human action to use the same thing or attach a similar kind of moneyness to similar things, that of course enhances the moneyness even further. So it's a discovery. So Bitcoin has this surprising story of 17, 18 years of increasing moneyness against all odds. Like it's everyone who had any idea about economics almost thought it would fail and it wouldn't sustain. And me as well, for a long time, I was pretty confident that it was very unlikely to get more moneyness. But as is gradual, of course, we can't really say that Bitcoin is money, because money is not a final stage. And of course, for most people, other assets have more moneyness in their day-to-day life, be it in payment, be it in investment. The Austrian school understood that moneyness is not just only paying, not just only communicating value in space, but also in time. It means saving, and saving is crucial for human beings. So that's why we encompass something like an asset, which for most people is just, okay, I buy it and I hope the number goes up. Let's be honest, it's part of the Bitcoin adoption, of course. It doesn't mean that, that's why it's not money. It's like, no, that's another form of moneyness, and it's a problem that people have. Protecting your purchasing power is really difficult, and we try to figure out, and now we had to learn again the hard way, that this uncertainty leads to a lot of volatility because it's discovery. We don't know yet. No one has a crystal ball. So some were too eager. There was a lot of financialization, of course, politicization, which is normal with the adoption of a new asset, but it brings in all the fiat volatility. And of course, it's in an uncertain age already, and this year is already starting out to be like a pivotal year with so much uncertainty out there. Then, of course, all our convictions are shaken. And we discover again, we try to figure out, okay, what is it actually for? How did it help me? What's the right long-term perspective to take? What was wrong? And again, I committed mistakes in that cycle, as many did. And maybe we were a bit too quick in some regards, and we have to figure out, okay, wow, it's a discovery, and unfortunately it's a feedback loop, so it's a network effect. So it doesn't help if you figure it out for yourself. Other people have to figure out things as well, and that has to go along. So Bitcoin has remained a big challenge to our understanding. But that's a sign that there really actually is something in it, that it has this network structure of a technology, and a lot about it will be frustrating, as it was with the internet. Internet adoption was very frustrating for the early cypherpunks. But still, we don't want to miss it. It's like no one thinks about, okay, should we get rid of the internet? It's like it's there. It's a powerful technology, and it turned the world to the better. With a lot of challenges and a lot of new problems that emerged out of that. Yeah, this kind of like uncensorable protocols are really underrated.
What other assets like have like high moneyness score? So for example, like lately, aside from Bitcoin, there was a big surge of silver and gold as well. Is there any like unusual assets that have like high moneyness too?
Yes, the problem is that the highest degree of moneyness is in assets that for reasons of a distorted structures have acquired more and more moneyness, but are not really working that well. And for Europeans, it's mainly real estate. So if you look at how middle-class Europeans have communicated value over time, like they worked hard, they saved, and are now comfortable, now feel free. And for many Europeans, they went for real estate. And real estate is a terrible asset when it regards moneyness, because it's immobile. You don't really own it. And that, of course, has reduced the autonomy of people. It has given them more financial autonomy, but has locked them in bad jurisdictions that made use of that you're immobile, that like pushed taxation for immobile work so high that it's just crazy. All in the name of protecting labor, which just makes now you're one of the worst places to be a laborer, actually, to live off your labor. So that's a problem. We always have, markets have this network effect, and once there are distortions, that can accrue a lot of monetary premium to assets that are not really shaped for that. Gold and silver had historically moneyness, and there are good reasons for that. And they have this kind of final settlement structure and the increasing marginal cost of production. That's the economic term for hard money, that it's not easy to produce more. It's costly. It's always unfortunately costly to produce more of it. But their moneyness compared to history is fairly low. So compared to real estate, they're really small assets, but have retained some moneyness for quite a while. Now they had a very strong year, those assets, but also we are seeing the volatility come back, and it's not like gold and silver are stable because they're precious metals. That's economic mistake. No, they can be very volatile. They have benefited through a lot of uncertainty about the monetary order, where the dollar is strong. So central banks that are not aligned with the US-led order have tried to get their hands onto as much gold as possible. And it has worked out. We've seen the case in Russia that with the war happening, they realized, okay, the payment structure is politicized. Our assets will be taken and blocked if we don't go along. And I'm not judging here what Russia is doing on the war side. It's just like pragmatically what they realized is this dollar-based or euro-dollar-based payment order can't be relied on if you're not allied with the geopolitical interests of the US. So gold has been performing really well. Russia has sold gold in this bull run and made back more with depreciation than they lost in blocked assets in the European Union. So that has worked out. And of course, that's an effect. It works out for nation states. It doesn't work out that well for individuals. So that's the thing. Now with China and Russia, the interests of China and Russia are not the same of the interests of individuals. So try to do that with gold and silver. And if you look at the back record, I've always had gold and silver for a long time. But the trouble, inconvenience, the friction, the costs aligned to it have eaten over time a lot of that valuation, because you have to store it somehow, and then the mobility is really terrible. If you want it to be mobile, it has to be financialized, and then it's an IOU with all it's censorable. Like I've had gold accounts being censored. I was an early user of eGold, for example, and then suddenly at one time the CIA had my gold, and I had to prove to the CIA, like, who am I? Why did I have the money to buy that gold? Because it's an IOU. It's like, that's the banking structure. It can always be censored. It's not your money that's in the bank or at the broker. You don't own the stocks or the digital gold. You don't really own it. It's held for you in custody. So that's a risk. So if you really want to have autonomy, then of course just remembering 12 words makes it possible to bring any amount of value across borders. With gold, good luck. I have flown with gold in airports. It always like comes up in the X-ray, and then you have to prove where the money's from, and it's very low limits in the EU. And if you can't come up with the proof, they take your gold. So it's immediately taken. So it's not really uncensorable money unless you dig it in your garden and you remember where it is, but then it's very immobile. Then it's not mobile. So of course it has usefulness. We can all be happy that it's around. It brings more diversity to the world. It has helped a lot of people to protect some of their assets in these uncertain times. But we shouldn't overrate it. It's not like a superior monetary technology, obviously. It's rather something of the past, I'd say. It was very useful in the past, but because there were a lot of autonomous structures built on top of it, you had this merchant network, this autonomous merchant network, where you didn't have to ship a lot of gold. You could trust a lot of people that store gold for you, and you could use that infrastructure. And for a while, it worked really well. But Bitcoin is based on the same innovations. It's the double entry bookkeeping that turned into triple entry bookkeeping with Bitcoin, and it's algorithmic money. The insight that it's not actually the number or the face on the gold coin, but the purity and the weight that you should use as a kind of algorithmic standard that can be forged. That's the same insight that went into Bitcoin. So I'd say it's a technological upgrade and still very early in the process. So gold still like 10 times bigger or more now with the run it had. But the run came from central banks, non-aligned, non-Western central banks trying to buy it up. And we can't say now, wow, that's something that enhances obviously the autonomy of the individual in the next decade.
And what other assets, like besides Bitcoin, would you recommend for us to keep as an individual? Because it's an uncertain time. I know it's not easy to travel with gold. It's not easy to travel with cash. Obviously, like, why would you do that in general? But like, if you would want to move some money, then it's a limited amount. And apart from Bitcoin, it's always good to have some backup plans to diversify these assets as well. So what would you recommend?
Yeah, I think it's good to have some gold. So that certainly is a diversification. For most people are not investors, and if you invest in your own company, in the own thing, in the thing that you know more about than other people. You want to do saving usually, and the problem saving has really become difficult. The best asset in the last decades, other than Bitcoin, was a passive index ETF, of which most of the returns came from big US stocks. So if you're very conservative, you'd still have some passive index ETF in your portfolio. But it's a bit crazy. It's like buy what everyone else is buying in a time of a big pivot. I think according to your risk preference, most people would sleep better if they were not 100% in Bitcoin, but had some allocation that they could like change between. And usually it's not stock picking. Usually it's a kind of passive index ETF exposure. But then if you look at it, of course, you realize what are the issues and challenges, and that makes Bitcoin shine relatively, in particular in a bear market like that. Of course, like at the top of Bitcoin, if you're very really enthusiastic, and everyone is enthusiastic about it, and it's like a kind of we told you so, have fun saving poor kind of thing. That's usually a sign that you want to diversify. And diversification usually is what kind of liquidity do you need to be able to sleep when you have a family and have expenses, and Bitcoin corrects for 50%. Like probably it's a year of expenses or so where okay, I'll be able to pay my bills. And that you keep in a more liquid form depending on where you live. I live in Switzerland. I have some in Swiss francs of that liquidity, or assets that are very close to it, which are very conservative, professionally managed liquidity reserves, just to sleep better. It's not saying that it's a better speculative play, but that's the thing. Like health of sleep liquidity, I'd say. And then depending on your circumstances, like are you at risk of being censored by banks? Has it happened that the bank accounts have been closed, that you have issues? If that never appears to you, and no, I have a job, a fiat job, there's nothing shady at all happening, all my interests are within the country, then you can have more exposure in this index ETF kind of world. Or there is an industry that you know more about than others, but usually that's the field you work in, and then usually it's your own company that you hold equity in and hold shares in. And then it's a kind of play thing. Sometimes it's good to experiment, but that's rather I would look in the sense of a long-term thing. And its experimentation can be looking into other jurisdictions. Like think about plan Bs. That could be assets, bank accounts in other jurisdictions, learning about residency requirements, all this multi-flag strategy. That was a very early insight of some economists of the Austrian school, that geopolitics you can really change. You can only adapt to it. So if you want to experiment with stuff and have a speculative part of your portfolio, then I think it's a good idea to invest some in that, figuring out how to bring in other flags and how to avoid this kind of lump sum risk. So if you already have a big Bitcoin exposure, I don't think you would invest in more Bitcoin companies or the MicroStrategies of the world, the Bitcoin treasury companies that wouldn't decrease your risk. So if your job is in the same jurisdiction as your nationality and your assets, then first on the asset side, you look at other assets. Like what happens if your jurisdiction crashes and all the assets crash? So you want to increase exposure in other jurisdictions that you have a better feeling, or that could like be an alternative. Just avoid that kind of a chunk or a lump risk in your portfolio. And there I would go with this kind of diversification, geographic diversification, asset diversification. Could even be real estate, but for most, like real estate is very clunky. It takes a lot of money to buy some, and it's a very active investment usually. So if you have a lot of liquidity, I could see potentially small real estate in jurisdictions that you have an interest in emerge. But usually it's not a good idea to live in the real estate that you own and have bought on debt. It's just the risk is very high. If you can get cheap money, then you can use that. But usually you want to use it in a way where it's not everything depends on you having the same job going forward, because otherwise you not only lose your job, you use your house and probably 90% of your wealth in many cases. And that's not a good idea. That's where you would diversify first. And for most people, really, the Bitcoin allocation is not that big. They're just a small bubble of people that have this huge whole structure. For a lot of it is just stacking. You stack more, and that way you diversify because you have a fiat income. And then I think the great thing about Bitcoin is that you can start with arbitrary small amounts, and you don't need any forms to fill out. It's no permission asked. Anyone on any place in the world can do that in one way or another to save some on the side. Yes, but if you have 100% Bitcoin exposure, and I mean you've learned something from this cycle with all gone, or many Bitcoiners have been through many cycles already, and it's hard. We learn from that over time. Really, the most important thing is the peace of mind you should have, and money is not everything. It's maintaining the peace of mind can sometimes mean that it may not always be a good idea to have 100% Bitcoin exposure.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's what I learned during COVID. I had nightmares that my heartbeat was linked to the Bitcoin price. So that was not a great idea to be 100% in Bitcoin, that's for sure. But yeah, anyway, we live and learn. So that was one lesson that we learned. Many of our followers or listeners actually are very high percentage in Bitcoin, because for some reason, even though Hungary is a very small country, we have many Bitcoiners. And in terms of percentage, there are like so many Hungarians working in crypto in general, so not just in Bitcoin, which is interesting. It might be actually the effects of our like shared heritage or like shared cultural trauma.
Yeah, although the Pengu hyperinflation is a very famous case study.
Could be actually, because inflation is very high in Hungary at the moment, and not just that, but like the taxes. In terms of like income tax, you pay, I think, close to like 40% of your salary when it comes to like the tax and the health insurance combined, which is one of the highest in Europe. And we have one of the highest in inflation. And the food prices are insane, like compared to any other country. So it is a very interesting place to live in, but definitely like these kind of experiences possibly make you think about like other ways of using your money. Do you think that like Bitcoin can realistically like coexist with like states in general, or like is it inherently adversarial?
That's a good question. I think the nation state developed through military technology for a while. So only a change in military technology will shift from the nation state. And I see that potentially happening. Bitcoin is a tool and a protocol. It can be used by nation states, and it's not at odds. It's a potential alternative as a neutral, geopolitically neutral money. And so that could be very important for nations, politicians in nations that value a kind of geopolitical autonomy, but don't have that access or trust in using gold as potentially other asset, which is not that neutral because the markets are relatively centralized. So China had to set up its own gold exchange and gold market, but then you depend on China a lot with the sourcing and exchange. And the problem with the non-Western, the BRICS countries, for example, is they don't necessarily trust China more than the US, which is generally are not completely aligned geopolitically with the US. but still, I don't see a kind of BRICS currency or fiat currency emerging. So yes, for some nation states, I'm not saying it's a good thing to go for this autonomy. Usually, it's not worth it. Geopolitical autonomy. If we're a small nation, which tend to be the sounder ones, usually it's better to either be neutral and or be aligned with a strong bully next to you. But that's just like for pragmatic reasons, like we would do if usually it's not worth the price that, for example, Venezuela and Cuba pay for being not part of the US geopolitical alliance in Latin America. I'd say it's not worth it. And it comes into it that they are socialists, but it's not really the ideology that's that important. It's the kind of nation state wants to control the resources to then use them for military and geopolitical purposes. And that's always a central planning aspect. So Bitcoin is neutral. That's the good thing, and that's the answer to that. It's really a tool. It allows more individual autonomy. So if your national identity is based on not individuals having autonomy, because you have a collectivist identity or something, then it could seem at odds. But then you could, of course, completely financialize Bitcoin when it happened, and just allow people not to use it individually. They could still use it, of course, but to have it as a central bank asset and only allow exposure through regulated IOUs or something. It's not good in the cypherpunk appeal of Bitcoin, but it's something that will happen as it happened with gold, this financialization, politicization. It just shows you it's a neutral technology. And the great thing, you still have the option usually, and there's still this peer-to-peer possibility. And even China was never able to completely outlaw it in its country, even though it's been the worst adversary of Bitcoin. And it has been an adversary for this reason, that the Chinese believe they can't trust the population with capital mobility, because most Chinese who have money want to move it out immediately. And that's why China has been the tough on Bitcoin and not ready to appreciate it. And I think it's worked out for the worse for China. It's stagnating, and it's lost a lot of that openness and access to capital. There are no Chinese unicorns emerging anymore as they used to be, like big companies that compete with Western companies. It's still, they have a lot of advances in centralized military technology, but technology is always about like, what's the next thing that no one knows about yet, and that's usually where more collectivist, centralized places fall behind a bit. And China is really only that strong because the EU has, in a sense, copied China and its centralization without the competence. So the dynamics are moving away from Europe, even though in many technologies, European entrepreneurs and scientists would still be world leading, falling back a lot to what's possible if you have like just average competent engineers focusing a lot of money on certain fields, but then also leaving the entrepreneurs, if they are within these industries, the freedom to experiment and compete in the market.
Tudtad, hogy a BitcoinBázisnak van egy saját webshopja is? Na ott tényleg minden megtalálható, ami egy bitcoinernek vagy kriptorajongónak kellhet. Hardware tárcák, könyvek, kiegészítők, meg persze néhány menü ajándék is. Nálunk nem csak forinttal, hanem bitcoinnal és altcoinokkal is fizethetsz teljesen biztonságosan. Ráadásul, ha bitcoinnal fizetsz, automatikusan 10% kedvezményt kapsz. Szóval, ha legközelebb hardware tárcát keresel, vagy meglepnél magad valami kriptós cuccal, nézd be a bitcoinbázis.hu/shop oldalra, mert így nem csak magadnak, hanem a podcastnak is segítesz.
And if we talked about China already, like what's your thoughts on CBDCs? And then like another follow-up question following the CBDCs, like from a historical perspective, was there any states or do states ever voluntarily give up their monetary control?
No, almost never. So they have to give it up sometimes, and it happened a lot in the past. States always run out of other people's money, and then they have to be attractive again for money, and then they have to give up the control of money, because otherwise they won't have money flowing in. It's either debt or investment, equity side, both the same logic applies, and that has always happened in the past. CBDCs, we've had CBDCs for a long time. What we didn't have is retail CBDCs, like individuals, because we have the digital bank currency, but not a retail central bank digital currency. So it's really a kind of competition with the banks. The banks already have been politicized so much that they are basically a government control cartel. But there's still like some private interest joined in there, and finance is still a cartel where you can make a lot of private money as well. So that'll be the challenge now. Do the banks trust that within a structure where CBDCs are used more by retail people, like would then have their own accounts, central bank accounts on their iPhone, for example, would that harm banks, or can banks still make money in that regard? And it's not all that clear. So most European banks are very hesitant about CBDC introduction. It's really just the main driver for it is that Europe and European banking, because it has been so centralized and formed into cartel, is not innovative enough. So a lot of the payments have gone to US companies. We use Apple Pay and Google Pay and credit cards, and it's all dominated by big American companies, these payment rails. And there, of course, was the EU reactions like, okay, that can't be it. The technology can't be that difficult. Why don't we have European standards? But just setting standards top down does never work. So they even like experimented with an open source standard, which was the best approach so far. But of course, it's not about technology. It's about the big stakeholders figuring out that they can still make money and have enough control. So I think it's a general process, but within failing structures. I'm neither like apocalyptic in that regard that will all be entirely controlled. It's still a struggle, and there's more digital control coming. But we already have a lot of that on the KYC AML level, which is most people don't realize how terrible that is, how much it restricts capital mobility, how much it makes your money censorable, how much it's abused against people, how much your identity is at risk, really, how much there are, and there'll be much more leaks. And Bitcoiners know there's a huge risk for you personally with all these leaks of private addresses coming from KYC data that are even have been sold in France by people within the government authorities to criminals. Is the kind of unimaginable corruption that's happening there. So those are very bad things. CBDC for now is part of that package of trying to still control something without being innovative. And so it's something to struggle with, but not something entirely new. It's not like this catastrophic new thing. With a bit of the fear comes from China that already has like fintech based but state controlled monetary layers. Where in part they have recreated something that Europe already had, this kind of credit data collection and centralization, but they plugged it into this now control approach that we've seen during the pandemic, which I think is starting to fail in China already, and there's a backlash of people seeing all the control doesn't lead to better lives because the decisions aren't actually better, they are worse. And then a lot of the control is against the symptom of people reacting to bad decisions. And so you lose the knowledge of something not working. So that makes me a bit more optimistic that it's not clear that all this technology will be used in the long term just for control and top-down control, because top-down control does not work out that well in the long term. But those are big challenges, of course, and that's where Bitcoin becomes ever more important, and other decentralized technologies and protocols become more important. It's just we have to face the fact that for most people, privacy is not a crucial need as long as they don't experience the problem linked to it. And with more problems emerging, I think more people will realize how important it is, how much threat there is out there in this digitized world. If your data floats around freely and is abused, but for now, it's still a tiny minority that sees the big problem. And if more people see it, then of course a CBDC would have to respect and offer more privacy. And if most people don't see that as an issue, then of course, no matter if CBDC or not, we now have like a centralized gathering of all bank and crypto exchange information that will next year pass on automatically to the authorities. It's not a CBDC thing, but it's like the threat of this control that happens in any regard, no matter the form that you use.
Yeah, but there are like at least like a couple of, or like a handful of companies that helps you to get Bitcoin without like doing much KYC necessary. For example, there is a company based in Switzerland called Bitcoin Peach, I think, and up to 1,000 euros a day, I think you can exchange Bitcoins. I'm not like exactly sure about the other conditions.
Unfortunately, the limits have been lowered. So that's unfortunate. So even Switzerland has a lot of regulation and pressure and losses on the privacy front. For now, the best take is peer-to-peer protocols like Wexel, for example, that allow the staking of non-KYC Bitcoin.
Well, let's hope like that the future is gonna be a bit brighter on the KYC side as well. But like, let's move on to a very interesting subject. Like, what is the? Can you tell me about like what is a Bitcoin Citadel?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it was originally a meme, and it was a negative meme. It was like, what do Bitcoiners do? They retire from society and move into their compounds as rich people when Bitcoin reaches 100,000 euros one day in the future, or $100,000. So that was like unexpected future, somewhere dystopia for the person that wrote about it. And then over time, Bitcoiners embraced it as something positive that happens a lot, like the idea, well, exit is not always bad. And of course, like moving away from society with your money, yes, that's what Bitcoin allows in a sense. It's a no, you say no to things. It's an exit ticket. And you shouldn't be blamed for it because you don't do it because you're anti-society. You do it to embrace your responsibility and autonomy. And for a lot of Bitcoiners, even ethical, moral reasons, where they say, okay, I want to have an exit because I don't believe that the systems and financial systems, political systems are just. So you can have any kind of reasons. And I think it's a very productive approach to sometimes exit and think about alternative structures and take these high risks. So the Bitcoin Citadel is about a new way of living together. And a lot of Bitcoiners have become more mobile and looking around and seeing that some jurisdictions even have opened up to become Bitcoin friendly, and realizing that that's some mobile capital of entrepreneurial people that take risks that could be a good selection of people. And I myself have embraced that. And I've seen the biggest challenge is if you have a family, it's difficult to be the kind of digital nomad, what lots of Bitcoiners do. And you don't need much money. You just rent somewhere in the third world a cheap place for yourself to lower your cost. So I embraced this idea of a Bitcoin Citadel and I think even more Bitcoiners, because they tend to be more optimistic in the long run, tend to embrace family, embrace having children, and don't think that we'll all have to die out because we're dying out anyway, and there's no hope. So a Bitcoin Citadel for me is a way for Bitcoiners to live healthy, productive, family-oriented lives without having to worry too much about politics and waiting for the big change to happen. So it's a flexible structure. I call the model citadel.guardian. That's a site which is a decentralized network of Bitcoiner villages that's like accustomed to or made for the idea that flag theory is really important to like combine different jurisdictions and make the best use of it and be flexible. It's not looking for utopia for Bitcoin. It's this kind of flexibility. But if you have a family, you need some kind of continuity and community as well, and embrace that. And we see that happen a lot of Bitcoin conferences versus big community gathering. Feels like a wandering city going around the world. And it's this embrace that it's good to have a positive approach to people that share similar values. And value also privacy and don't value the bling bling status games. So I think what we already see is a kind of voluntary sorting of people, like living close to each other. That's why a few jurisdictions then get a lot of visitors suddenly. It's like, oh, let's look at it. That happened in El Salvador and Madeira in Europe, where suddenly lots of Bitcoiners come and flock to, and then you have these network effects. It's like some like it so much they stay, the only alternative what some are doing is like they sell the Bitcoin and then buy some plot of land somewhere, like a homestead, but it usually doesn't work out really well because real estate is really bad asset. In particular, if it's an illiquid plot somewhere, it has a huge jurisdictional risk and legal risks and a lot of pain usually. So I think there it's better to cooperate with other people, and we do that through a Swiss structure where you still have all the benefits of ownership and control, but none of the individual problems of real estate. We can keep Bitcoin as collateral. We use Bitcoin-backed loans with the lowest rates we can get to finance Bitcoiner villages around the world as an option for Bitcoiner who still believe in the upside of Bitcoin in the long run, want to retain it, want to keep the flexibility, but want to have a plan B to potentially live in very safe places. We don't know what the world looks like in 5-10 years from now. Still be able to move, to travel, to go back to your home place, but diversify a bit this jurisdictional and geopolitical risk you have if everything is concentrated in one location. And I think for many Europeans, in particular, if you're an entrepreneur, it makes a lot of sense to have a plan B to potentially exit those high tax jurisdictions. You can still be linked to your home country and still be there, but you should be there as a tourist because a hard thing we've learned is that many countries that have unsustainable structures, they treat tourists better than their own citizens because they depend on this, like the last thing that really works and is growing in Europe. That many places depend on, but the citizens they can milk because they're not mobile, they can be regulated, taxed, and that's really a big issue. That's already also what made me leave my home country and place I've grown up in Vienna, a city with a lot of history, but over the years, just the quality of life goes down and the cost for you goes up so much that you feel trapped, and you are trapped. It has a unrealized gains exit tax. So if you are actually successful as an entrepreneur, and like your little company gets an investment and it's valued at a few million because you just got an investment, then you can't leave the country anymore without paying upfront based on this fictitious valuation that you don't have in the account. And that's like a kidnapping of people in a surrounding that's not really a good place to build new things. It's like a museum for tourists. That's why they'll treat tourists well for years to come, and great places to visit still. But not a good idea to like have all your existence and all your productive structures concentrated in a place like that can change overnight. And in Austria, it changed from one of the best places concerning taxation for Bitcoin holders to one of the worst places. Suddenly 27.5% capital gains. That just means if really there's a bull run and it doubles, you lose already a third of that, and you have to pay it. So that's a big issue, and that we can see that happen in many European places when these very unsustainable structures where you have a lot of unproductive people that have to be fed and housed and depend on it and are old in their old age, but there's no capital available. In most of the retirement systems, they are not capital based, they are pay-as-you-go systems. So if there are less productive and less workers available, and of course we have less children in the future, we all know that, nothing can change that because the women are already missing that could have those children. They have not been born. So we know that demographically there'll be a big challenge. And then all these what people thought they'd been saving their whole life will end up in a really difficult situation. And then, of course, everything that's immobile may be taken and mobilized to just, maintain a level of order. And it doesn't seem like there's really a clear alternative to that. Really, the only big hope is still a diversity being left over where Europeans can figure out the extra productivity, how they use the new technologies to make up for the missing children that are not there to be productive.
To the unrealized capital gains tax, I think it was the Netherlands that actually just implemented this, which is I don't know, it feels completely like crazy to me. Like, how can you pay taxes on something that you haven't even realized? Like, it's like, if you want my gains, then you can have my losses as well. So, for example, like now that my portfolio is like 65% down from the highs, then maybe I can get like some tax benefits from the States. And then in 2 years, when there will be again gains, which I'm not about to realize, to be honest, then they can also like take some percentage of it based on that. But then, that's, yeah.
Yeah, it seems crazy, but there is the reason, and the reason is there is no alternative for many European countries, and they feel if, of course, the more mobile people that discover other assets, it feels for those that are taxed at the full front, they feel at a disadvantage, and they already carry a lot of the tax burden. So there's a big shift, and that's why there was like almost unipartisan agreement in the Netherlands. We don't like it. We feel we need to do it because we already have financing problems in the government, and the majority of the population who are not really active investors feel like it's unjust that capital gains are not always taxed as labor is taxed around. Of course, those are it's very wrong in the long term, but a lot of it is like that in Europe. It seems like slippery slope and intervention spirals, another term from the Austrian School of Economics. It's a vicious circle. It's really hard to step out.
And then these Bitcoin citadels like meant to kind of help you to escape these kind of loops or like vicious circles. And there are like emerging places where lots of Bitcoiners tend to flock to. For example, Paraguay and Panama is one of those places now as well. El Salvador was one too, but now it's not that popular anymore because of the IMF loan that they took earlier. And then some parts of Asia, that's for sure, is also like a very popular destination for Bitcoiners. Are these like citadels or Bitcoiner cities are located in these areas? Or and how does like sovereignty look like beyond the practice, beyond just like, okay, we have Bitcoin, and then is there other like aspects of sovereignty when it comes to citadels or like Bitcoin citadels?
The first priority is to have peace of mind with your family. If you have a family, you don't want to be a martyr. You don't want to put a flag somewhere and fight for it. It's great. It's great to have heroes to do that and are pioneers. But it's not an issue someone with a family faces up front. So in a sense, we have to be more pragmatic. And most Bitcoiners are pragmatic in that sense. Sometimes we have a lot of hope, and that can be hopium. It's like we hope for that Bitcoin is a kind of utopia. It fixes everything. And then we tend to think one jurisdiction can be that kind of utopia, that finally you have that freedom. But that's not the way it is. The world is full of trade-offs. And there's no easy fix. And if you go from the family first perspective, then it doesn't seem at all convincing. That's like you have to be moved to El Salvador now from Europe. And it can be a really big failing your family in thinking that there's a quick fix like that. There's a lot of reasons if you have European family and heritage to want to remain close to that home, at least. And so Latin American jurisdictions enter the picture, and we're scouting for one for this arbitrage play. Paraguay is currently the easiest location to have this tax residence, which does not tax foreign income. It's not for all European countries an easy fix because it's hard to get then the paperwork to convince your government that you're actually residing somewhere and paying their tax. So it depends again on your context. For most Europeans, I think that living in Paraguay now and moving there is such a big risk. You look at the climate, that it's a third world country. That is really remote, that many will end up not doing it. They'll visit. And so it's mainly young digital entrepreneurs that don't have a family yet that are eager to just try it out. And they love that you have very low costs there. So it's a value location, but it's a value location if you're young, pioneering, and want to have a low cost, easy life that offers you an upside because there's least taxation and a lot of entrepreneurial freedom. So it's a great location. But what we try to optimize it, make it easier for people that don't already have it easy because they have nothing left to lose and are on their own and can be anywhere on the planet. That's we started with locations that are in Europe and close to Europe and make use. Of course, still jurisdictions that are a bit better in how they handle Bitcoin and capital gains and that stuff, and only locations that are really good to tourists if you don't become a citizen there, and leave a lot of freedom to people that are temporarily on the ground. But where we chose the first three locations that are within easy reach in Europe. We started in Istria in Central Europe. Our second locations on Madeira, the island, just for the whole value appeal. And it's a lot of things. It's accessibility, it's climate, it's infrastructure, so well-connected places where you don't take all the risk in being somewhere so remote that, of course, if you already have wealth and retire, that's something else. A lot of rich Americans buy second houses in Panama and now in El Salvador. So a lot of the tribe in El Salvador, for example, the price is going up so much in El Zonte. It's rich Americans and Canadians that buy a second, third condo as a kind of diversification. And that, of course, drives prices up so much that the value is not there, because you have to be pragmatic as a family. It's like, oh, that would be really crazy to sell your Bitcoin now to buy an overpriced condo in a third world country and have all your wealth gone into that. It's not clear that you can sell it again. A lot of issues can arise with utilities not working, with building problems, legal problems, anything. So I would heartily advise against this approach. If you are a young pioneer, absolutely do that. If you're a family, you need that kind of certainty, stability, and flexibility. So stability means flexibility these days. So we know we need various locations. We need a portfolio of locations. And we need a structure that allows you to not be a tax resident on the ground somewhere and still allow you to spend a lot of your time close to where you're from, so you can maintain the family and the business relations that you have built up and that are there. So it's a more pragmatic approach, but I think it's also a good way to look at Bitcoin as not this kind of utopia that fixes everything. It's just by like shilling or buying Bitcoin, you've solved all your problems. Now it's a tool, and it has to fit in your whole life structure, and it has a different role in different phases of your life. But a lot of problems come from yourself, and of course, living in a very uncertain time it is, and a lot of things to figure out first. And I think the well-being of yourself and your family and your children is a much higher priority than being a pioneer in a new jurisdiction. So, of course, you can go to El Salvador and support Bukele because you think it's great what he's doing. I take a generally critical, skeptical approach to politics. I tend to think that in the long run, it's much better not to have too much hope and faith in politicians, because they don't solve your problems. They will never be able to solve your problems. They have a very different set of problems. And you can still admire some politicians for what they seem to achieve as strong persons with a passion. But usually it's better to focus on things that are within your control and where you can know actually and don't have to rely on social media reporting. And the same is true with Bitcoin. I think one thing also we can learn every cycle is be aware of a kind of bubble perception. If you're a Bitcoiner, it means you now must follow all the Bitcoin influencers, and that of course can be. It doesn't have to be. It's great to be passionate about it, and that's the strong thing about Bitcoin. Is also a community of people that are passionate about the kind of freedom technology, but it can be a distraction from what you can actually control. And I don't want to see like people drop everything and go all in Bitcoin, not only money wise, but attention wise. Like you only look at the price and the Bitcoin Twitter drama your whole day. No, that's not something you can control. So focus on what you can control. And that's our approach with Bitcoin. Citadels, it's a very down to earth, very proof of work kind of thing. I needed something, or looked for something for myself, a plan B for my family, and I invested myself and brought along other Bitcoiners, and we are taking the whole risk ourselves privately and try to figure out as we go along how to build something like that actually helps Bitcoiner families in the long run. And it helps not by offering a utopia or panacea, it helps by offering a plan B that is reasonably valued, has a reasonable value and reasonable risk structure for you, and it is attainable to more families. So you can do something that only very rich people are able to have, like 3-4 alternative plan B houses somewhere around the world. If you do it in this cooperative way, it's much more attainable for a middle class family.
Let's talk a bit about like education as well, because I'm sure that like part of Bitcoin Citadels is education. So why did you found Scholarium, and what do you think is broken about like modern academia?
I've been in education for a long time. I've taught for 15 years at universities and been an educational entrepreneur and very much involved in the unschooling, homeschooling movements in Austria and then Europe. Because, of course, I realized that education, like many other big Western institutions, has shown the same dynamic I explained earlier on, of where we tend to consume a kind of status that has been built up in the past, and a lot of people live off of that. It's the same thing in journalism, where people expect that it's a source of truth because there were great and courageous journalists in the past, but actually now it's a broken business model that is maintained by very artificial incentives, and truth is not the essence of it. And in education, it's the same thing. Learning is not the essence of the educational structure. It's in the schooling part, it's actually a glorified kindergarten. It's for parents. It's a way that you can maintain a career and have someone watch your children in a safe environment. So, for a part of the day, your kids are off and you think they're safe. And that's the value provided. For anything else, there's not a good empirical basis in figuring out do children actually get better? Do they learn? Some do, but would they have done without school? Probably yes. So if you look at the empirics like cost and return, it's terribly frustrating. It's terribly frustrating what's happening here, and what a waste actually of potential and resources is happening. This kind of safe place where you maintain a career has two problems. The first is if actually a lot of the careers are artificial. It's like you pay so high taxes that you need two people who work full time to then pay for the salary of one person employed by the government to take care of other people's children, for example. That can be quite a distortion. If you really look at what's the cost of the educational structures, and you realize, they are not really for free. They are not really cheap. They have the price of an international elite private school in the real cost, but the performance, of course, partly terrible. And then the safety is a big issue. Now we see, and the digital world has made it a bit worse, is the biggest risk is the peer pressure in artificial surroundings. So a lot of schools have these like artificial same age people in a surrounding that's coercion based, that you have to be there, you don't want to be there. And then it's a lot of toxicity, in particular if you have now digital media access that reinforces the whole peer group pressure, in particular around puberty. That's why we see suicide rates going up, mental health going down a lot. So you can't be sure if your children are at this location for a large part of the day that they'll come home safely. There are a lot of mental issues that lead to mobbing in schools. And of course, the ideological component, which is not so much teachers. Of course, teachers, in particular government teachers, are a selected group. Very few people know that the largest turnout of Nazi voters was actually teachers. Because they are usually government employees that trust these institutions that much and rationalize a lot about it. So they are already ideologically, there's a big bias in teachers. You see the same at university. It's not a central plan, I'd say. It's a kind of spontaneous sorting of what kind of people go for these safe careers. Where you have a lot of holidays and you still think you have status, you do something good. This ideological danger is there as well, that your kids go to school and then a university and they come back home and you realize they are not your children anymore. They have completely different values. They look at you differently. They think that you're evil just because they have some moralized issues And I've heard that from many people, that your children age and you lose them in a way. And that's a big risk. And that, of course, leads to a counter reaction. And the pandemic was a big realization for lots of families that, wow, if now we realize what's actually happening, and the schools don't even do what they used to do, like keep the children safe in a place outside of home, but now it's like a Zoom call, a lesson, and they saw what's actually happening, and what they trusted not performing, and actually decreasing the quality of life for the children rather than helping them. That led to quite a counter reaction. And again, counter reactions to that in Austria, where it's one of the places in Europe that allowed you to do homeschooling, made it much tougher, and went after doing homeschooling groups became illegal, because they thought, oh, it's all the people that are against the pandemic measures. They are evil people, and if they get together, they actually need a school license, because then it's not homeschooling anymore. Which in Austria and Germany is much worse. There, the police can come and get your kid if you don't agree with the education that's provided to the child. So that was one of the reactions for people looking for plan Bs as well. And of course, if you're already critical about your society around you with a lot of Bitcoiner are, then you start asking these kind of questions. So education is at the core, but it's more like for some parents really about fleeing this educational pressure that you have as a resident, that the government enforces a kind of curriculum and a kind of peer group pressure on your children, and you feel like you have to share your children with someone else who doesn't have the best interest of your children at heart. And that led to us. I mean, this is one of the drivers of our project, the Citadel Garden, is to have a way, and for children, really, this safe environment. For us, it's a safe neighborhood. It's just like be in nature where children can meet other children and run around freely, so you don't have to watch them all the time. Just a place where you can be confident it's really safe. And that in this world, it's easiest if you control the location. That's why we do village-sized little neighborhoods that we know are perfectly safe, and the parents don't have to worry. And that's already the biggest issue. Like, you can now work and don't have to watch your child the whole day, but you're always there. You can always be there if your child needs you. You can always be there. You can share great moments with your child. You don't have to send it to a boarding school to get a good education in a safe environment. So you kind of integrate this boarding school thing in your whole neighborhood, but it doesn't feel like schooling. And some call it unschooling, in the sense a lot of learning comes from game play, and be allowed to be a child and be curious. But then, of course, we're a bit self-selected in all the families. Bring a lot of passion, ideas, and skills to the table. And of course, just by enhancing then through mentoring and tutoring and good offers, we think a lot more happy learning can happen than in the artificial locations that we've built up in many places. And for which the reason was closely linked to the nation state forming. It was producing the kind of conscript soldiers, and then a workforce for this immobile, highly text structure of working well in these artificial settings. And that originally was a lot of the idea behind why and how schools are shaped the way they are shaped.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard about the book called How to Raise a Genius?
Yes.
Is it like some kind of implementation of that? Because then making school a play and also making it kind of like fun and free-spirited is the basis of the idea, I think.
Yes, but I'm much more pragmatic. I'm not at all ideological in the sense. I'm very skeptical about like easy solutions. I don't think it's a recipe where you say, okay, let's just let your kid play and it'll be a genius. I wouldn't see it that way. I spend a lot of time with my children, or I say just have a way where you can live freely with your children, then a lot of learning happens anyway. I think it sometimes makes sense. I mean, if a children has an interest, then they want to learn, and sometimes discipline is part of life. Like you can always play, and you can always play the way you like to play. In particular, if there are screens around everywhere, and other children have exposure to things that you don't think are appropriate for the age already. Uh, so, of course, we have an issue in Europe in falling behind a lot in the important skills and the mint subjects, I'd say, that are really like linked to actually producing something in the real world. Um, and so that's a big of an issue of alternative education. If you now think you need just a curriculum that's just creative and play, like I say, no, you don't need a curriculum. A sound way to live with your children is they are free to play a lot. So they shouldn't do repetitive, stupid homework, just so that every child has at least a minimum of education. That's not a good way. It must be more individualized, but it doesn't mean that you always do what you feel like in the moment, because sometimes you understand what's really important and then you go through a frustrating phase. You have to be concentrated and patient. We want to offer the families options, and there'll be options for talented children to not spend more than 2 hours per day, I think, but with a good tutoring that's using also modern technologies. So there's nothing bad about a screen if it's used and AI to help you learn. So I think it's one of the success stories of Alpha School has been doing in the US. Is realizing, okay, if you still believe there is a value in repeating cognitively challenging tasks and acquire some skill and structural thought this way, that can be done much better than doing homework and going to school the whole day. If it's individualized and if it doesn't feel like it takes away too much of your playtime, then I think it's better to combine that. As me as an entrepreneur with a natural science background, I take much more interest in. I don't say everything is alike. It's not the same if you play uh, an easy game or encounter the beauties of maths or the universe, and that's difficult. That's why it's not always comfortable. But if you in any way have an interest, of course, I see it also as a responsibility of a parent to make that accessible and to work on yourself and to try out actually hard things, difficult things, and grow with these things. So we want to combine that and offer the families an option. But the most important thing, and that's what most people don't see, is these safe surroundings where you can just relax a bit and trust that your children will be fine. They'll turn out fine. Maybe not a genius, because that takes a lot of drive. Um, um, but still, I mean, persons, if you love them, you'll get a lot of love back, and it's amazing to watch them grow as personalities and figure out. And we all have to figure out a lot in this world. So this idea of like top-down teaching or frontal teaching anyway isn't working that well. But it doesn't mean that we have to let go of this rich heritage of a language, literature-based culture. That's difficult. That has numeracy and literacy, and shows an active interest in difficult problems and difficult challenges that I think we shouldn't let go easily, and just live as if we were on an eternal holiday. Is a bit, I think, too consumist. And that's part, I think, of the Bitcoiner ethos as well. They have this long-term approach and see, actually creating something, producing something, the perseverance in difficult challenges, kind of anti-fragility is part of our existence, and is important.
And not everyone has the opportunity to join a school like this, but what do you think, like, should young Bitcoiners study if they want to think independently rather than just like speculate, or if they want to learn to think independently?
Reality. Study reality. That was the original, the most important part of the Austrian school is this realism. And this realism first means you need to understand you cannot study a subject like that. It's not it. You don't go to school and then study economics and then that's something like you can consume it, you can download it. It doesn't work that way. You need to understand what's actually happening at a school or a university and what are the opportunities it provides for you. A lot of it is a kind of certificate competition where you communicate a potential employer that you have made it through a filter. That is not always the best one. It's a filter. But if you have finished a degree, the main information it has is you are able to be at some place early in the morning every day, do some cognitively challenging tasks and finish them in time. It's not a proof that you know something because we know there's very little retained. It's not clear that it's anything of that is valuable for the job. There's not a lot of indication. Most of the learning is on the job, actually. When you go there, it's just you do a degree to filter something. If that helps you, this structure, it's better to have that filter because you have a certificate that proves that at least you are able to show up to something tedious that you don't understand why it's useful, and you do the grind. And that's important for a lot of careers. For the new world, I don't think it's that important. It's hugely overrated. So I would only go to university if I see other advantages, and that the most highest advantage is either a university is tightly integrated into an industry in some locations. So some good universities are within an ecosystem of industry where it's just easier. So if you study at MIT, for example, you're encompassed in a part of the US industry with the filter effect. If you can go there and it's worth the price and you can afford it, and you see the kind of career and the opportunity it gives you, then go for it. And the same in Europe. So there is either integrated into an industry or it's integrated into a very costly structure as in the natural sciences. If you want to do molecular biology and you need expensive labs, university can be a really cheap way to access these labs. And it's a legitimized way to spend some years without being employed. It's your parents will understand it, society will understand it, no one will judge you and tell you, hey, you're like 23, why are you not earning money? Saying, no, I'm doing a PhD in molecular biology. Everyone will say, wow, even better. But it doesn't mean that it's actually better. There's nothing without you actually doing something with it and seeing it as a gateway to an industry you really take an interest in and see strength, or a network of people that you meet there, or access to technology that's cheaper than like doing it in your garage, your basement, kind of thing. So that's a very realist approach to university. Or school, the same thing. I hope my children don't want to go to university because there's not that much value outside of very peculiar careers. I think the best education still available from the realist perspective is the vocational structure in Switzerland. Germany and Austria used to be good, not anymore. Because it is the best ticket to early on be part of productive enterprises, because you learn on the job most. The vocational school is only part-time school and part-time work already at a real company and learn a real skill in the crafts or in technology. And then you're very early, you're very young, and you already have a job opportunity and skill set. And then you can still decide to do something. But all the like higher education is leisure. That's where the whole school actually means leisure, translated from Latin, and leisure is a luxury. So it was like the rich youngest child of a noble house that went to become part of the clergy and went to the monastery with the huge libraries, because its leisure is a luxury. If you study economics, it's a luxury. It's not by reading the Austrian school and the old texts. It's very interesting. It's a great way to spend your time if you care about like complex questions, but it's not something that will give you an immediate way to be productive to society. The demand for PhDs in economics is very artificial. There is not really a close link to anything productive that people voluntarily want and need. And the best kind of analysis comes from people that have experience, that have seen a real economy working, that have been entrepreneurs or in industries, and I think also that for me has been true. I've only, I think, become a better Austrian economist by going through many disciplines, not only economics. I'm originally a nuclear physicist, and having always been an entrepreneur and trying out new things and working with technology and having an international focus. That's important and underrated. And then, of course, the leisure and reading and thinking helps you on the higher level, but it can't replace it. And it's certainly the worst kind of thing is concentrate all the efforts of education when we have the least willingness to engage in it, when we're like 17, 18, and we want to discover the world and we want to party and we want to live. And then we need to go to school. Then we are, of course, we're looking for shortcuts and can't take the time to really think about the questions. We're just producing what is needed from us for the exams and enjoy that we have a reason to like spend a few years outside of home and not have a job. And that's what's great, what feels great about university. But it's not about education. It's something else. And if you're honest about it, you can still pursue it and understand it. But then I think it's much better as an 18-year-old to go to Paraguay and live on a budget and just try out things and meet people and have a good time and yeah, travel the world maybe. Than going to a university if you're not very clear of why you're there, what do you want to do with that, why that's a big stepping stone for you.
Yeah, I mean, not so. For example, I had the chance to take a gap year before university, and that was like very beneficial for me in general because I could travel, I could work a little bit, I could understand why I want to go to university, what do I want to study, if I want to study, if I want to work next to it, if I don't want to, and then all these things. So I got very lucky in that sense, and to be honest, it's not useful to have a degree anymore, but it is a requirement. So we can say that, like, okay, for example, like if you are not starting your life already, like building a startup, then if you want to work for a company, sometimes they don't even consider you unless you have a degree, and it doesn't even matter what kind of degree. So you can even study like philosophy or whatever. Like, it doesn't really matter, to be honest, even if it's at least bit useful. But in a sense, as you said, like it just proves that you can show up and you can like start and finish something. So
yeah, it can be a ticket to some jobs, but it tends to be now not the better places to be. So companies that really have the shortcut in just selecting for degrees are usually in dying industries, I'd say, because they overrate this sorting function of the university. Yeah, but still pragmatically right now or the last few years, certainly it makes sense. And of course, if you want to go into law or medicine or stuff like that, those are protected cartels of jobs where usually the best way is go with a degree, but do it quickly and understand why you're doing that.
yeah. For example, like I just said, I got lucky in everything, to be honest, because when I started to go to university, I was already in crypto. And then my friends made a startup of a Hungarian like crypto exchange. And then we started to build that. And I got very lucky in a sense that I could work and go to university at the same time. I'm not saying that it was an easy time, but I learned a lot. And I actually did learn a lot in university as well. And I made like a very good network of people, which was very useful in a sense that everyone else from that university bunch got into like in some kind of entrepreneurship. and those connections came very handy later on, when I started to build my own, or when I started to like improve my career in general. So it can get useful in a sense, but definitely it's definitely a luxury and a leisure time. So university in hindsight, is not as hard, as many people, or like as I imagined it, for example, when I was in high school. And I thought, it's, oh my God, it's such a great accomplishment. It was a greater accomplishment to actually build in my job, and to learn more about crypto and Bitcoin, that I did in my spare time, but there was no university course about it back then. So, well, anyway, like, you don't need a university course to learn about anything, especially today, because every data is available. So if someone wants to look up something, you don't even need to go to the library anymore. You can just open your laptop or your mobile and then basically Google it. Yeah. So this episode got quite long, and I think we have still like many things to talk about, but. Is there anything that we didn't talk about today that you think would be very useful for our listeners to hear from you?
Oh, that's always a never-ending story, of course. Yeah, I mean, just I think that this kind of realism, maybe to take with to summarize a bit, and other than that, it's always a conversation that doesn't have to stop. So I encourage people to follow me on X. That's the only place where I share some thoughts in English occasionally, Scholarium_ET. Most of my educational program so far has been in German that I done, because the original Austrian school was in German. But I also figured out that learning in this like leisurely sense, it is best done through critical discussion, and by confronting what's actually happening in the world, and trying to understand the opposite arguments than the ones that seem likeliest and easiest to you. And yeah, I'd suggest that, and not see either Bitcoin or the Austrian school as a kind of thing where everything is figured out and you just have to preach to society. For me, it was a never-ending learning process that hasn't stopped yet. And I think it's a lot of value in just seeing that as a process that goes on, and keeps you a bit open and flexible in what's happening. So that's probably what I would give as a giveaway. But we've already gone for 2 hours, I think. So I'm really open to wrap it up with that.
Well, if our listeners actually want to have a part 2, I would love to have you back, because I really appreciate all the insights that you shared with us today. And it is definitely a valuable conversation. And I'm very thankful for your work actually as well, because we need these thinkers in the space. And especially, like, you're not just thinking, but you are also building something towards a sustainable future for a sovereign individual, especially for someone who is in Bitcoin. So I hope if one day I'm gonna have kids, or like my future kids could attend your school, or like be part of Scholarium, and then maybe like as a family I could actually like join in and see like how does it work to live in a community as a Bitcoin Citadel, or like something like a Bitcoin Citadel. So really, thank you so much for your work. And I really appreciate the time that you took, the work that you do, and this conversation as well. And I hope to have you back if there is any update, or our listeners have extra questions for you, so we can like discuss this in a little more detail and go deeper in the topic.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Barbara, for the great conversation. All the best, and happy to be back in the future.